In the last lecture, we looked at marketing engineering projects and we covered what marketing was, we looked at the 4 Ps and tried to differentiate between marketing and selling. In this lecture, we're going to look at the detail of how you can apply marketing to your projects and how you might actually engage with marketing teams to promote your projects and be successful in gaining funding for them. Why would engineers want to market projects in the first place? Because after all, they're engineers. They want to do technical challenges and solve the world's problems. Whether it's for projects or services, engineering design is ultimately destined for use by a customer, and it can be accepted or rejected. Most of the principles behind the 4 Ps completely apply to engineering design, and especially if you're producing end user products. And if you think about these problems early on in your design process, it can often lead you to a more appropriate answer to solve a customer or user's problem than if you leave it to the end. Marketing projects is not a bolt-on, it's a design-in, and it should be one of the fundamentals you design in the early stages in your projects. But many engineering designs, and in particular if they're infrastructure designs, are very large projects that impinge on the people. And because of that, we actually include a 5th P into the marketing mix, which is the people. Both the customers and users, or clients of the project, and also the stakeholders in the project. Back in 1820, an engineer called Thomas Treadgold suggested that the definition of engineering is the art of directing great sources of power in nature for the use and convenience of humankind. And this is important because it helps us identify and remember that when we do engineering and we do engineering projects, it is ultimately to address a social need. If you recall in my first lecture about the societal needs for engineers, this is key. Interestingly, the reason why civil engineering is so called is because it's addressing engineering for civil use as opposed to military use. Traditionally, engineers and engineering training does not pay a lot of attention to marketing because we're too tied up in the engineering. However, as the world has gone on, we need to adapt our thought processes in engineering to address the societal need and how we're going to use it. I recall one of the statements I showed you earlier. Science studies the world as is, but we create a new world. And we can either get that right or wrong. But most importantly, if we engage with the people who are going to live in that world, we've got a much higher probability of getting it right. Let's look at the downside first. Let's see what happens when we get it wrong. A sign of that is what we call social disengagement. People don't buy into it. And unfortunately, engineering is full of abandoned inventions that had people been engaged and been talked to, either the invention would never have been brought to the market, or it would have been brought to the market in a very different form to address the issues that people have got. Look at storing hazardous radioactive waste deep underground. Too much focus was spent addressing the technological challenges there, and not enough with the people and the benefits to the people of low-cost power. And an interesting example right now is fracking, the idea of releasing ground gas and ground oil. Because they have focused on addressing the technological issues, they've forgotten about the people, and now people don't really trust fracking. And there's lots and lots of other examples. I'm going to show you one about electric cars. In all the examples that exhibit social disengagement, did the technical team listen to the customer? Or did they take the attitude of, we know what's best and we know what's good for you? Here's Sir Clive Sinclair. He did some fantastic stuff. He brought the pocket calculator to the masses. In fact, I went through my school life using a Sinclair scientific calculator. He was tasked with coming up with the electric car, and he came up with this. And no matter how often he appeared on television, he became the laughingstock of the UK. A great pity. The man was truly genius as an inventor, but he failed to engage with the people who would want to use it. This is what the people really wanted. They wanted a Nissan Leaf or a Tesla. And these two companies met with their customers and spoke to them very carefully and said, what do you want? And they did not want a Sinclair C5. I'm not going to go through the detail of this slide, but this is a great example of how what a customer says they want and what a customer actually wanted can be two quite different things. And by the time you've actually spoken to them and understood their expectations, the whole concept of what the poor customer wanted at the end of the day can be completely changed. When you're doing your projects, when you're talking to the customer, think about this slide. Don't assume the customer can express precisely what they want, so you need to help them to understand and clarify what they expect and also what you can do for them. I would love a mobile phone that would last a year for one charge. I also know that I don't want a battery that weighs 25 kilograms. You need to work with the customer to explore what they want and what they expect, and also what their aspirations are in using the product. Sometimes there's great ideas, but they fail to engage with the public and they fail to earn, as is called, their social license. In other words, they don't get public approval. It is entirely possible. And if you look at some of the issues around the COVID lockdowns and restrictions, sometimes they are totally rejected by the court of public opinion. They may be perfectly logical proposals, but the public say, sorry, we're not playing, we don't want it. You also need to consider about the ethical issues associated with doing your projects. An engineer has sometimes to take the position of trying to protect the public to make sure that the new invention or new product doesn't actually harm or injure them. This has given rise to a new concept called responsible innovation, where it's beholden upon the engineers and technical team to engage with the users and the public to make sure that what they're doing is responsible. This is where researchers and engineering designers engage with the company and work out what are the risks, what are the things that are really important to the company. In a past life, as I say, I occupied the role of either marketeer or chief technologist on projects. And the reason I could do that is I spent a lot of my time speaking to customers on how they used my pieces of silicon, which meant when I came back into the office to design the next generation, I was designing features that the customer really wanted and not because they were cool to me. I'm not going to go into the whole theory of responsible innovation here, but I would encourage you to have a look at the reference I'm giving you on the slide and find out about responsible innovation, because it will affect you all in your professional lives as you go through and on projects as engineers. The core thing, and think about this for your ISTB4 project, engage with the public. Engagement starts with telling them about the project, but soon moves from telling them to sitting down and discussing and possibly negotiating feature sets with them. How do they want to engage with the product? Do they want to use it as handheld? Will it be plugged in? Must it be portable? Must it be used by children? Etc., etc. If you speak to the customer, they will tell you. And what more, as you talk to them, they are buying into your ideas as well. So when you say, well, I'm sorry, I can't do a mobile phone battery that lasts a year because this is the trade-off, they can go, okay, we never thought about that. Yeah, we agree with that. So when you produce the product that has a battery life of 1 week, they go, yeah, we'd like it longer, but we understand there's a trade-off between the size of the battery and how long it lasts. Talk about life cycle. Not only how you're going to create the project or the product, but how are you going to dispose about it? So traditionally, it was a cradle-to-grave approach. Build it, use it, and take it apart. That's no longer acceptable in engineering. We now must look cradle to cradle. In other words, build it, use it, take it apart, reuse it, and build something new from it. And that covers the actual product itself. Can it be reused? Or what is the disposal process and recycling process? Ethical approval. Is what you're proposing ethical? Yes, it makes money, but does it actually meet what the population would generally consider as an ethical product? And last thing is, does it meet the requisite regulations? Does it meet the standards? Is it safe to use? Is environmental performance in its usage case acceptable? I use as an example here the Toyota Prius. So the Toyota Prius was kind of the first electric car, and it was a hybrid, and it was being promoted as being very green. It was probably one of the worst contaminating cars ever produced because it was non-recyclable. It had a fuel economy that was disgusting, and yet it was being promoted as this ethical product. Very clever marketing. So let's summarize why you're doing marketing as engineers. Think about the marketing mix. How do you want to promote it? How do you want to position your product? Is it going to be high end and you're going to sell a few of them? Is it going to be low end and you're going to sell many of them? Who is your target customer? Is it going to be people that are highly technical literate and are quite happy to rebuild their home computers in their spare time? For engineering designs, it's safe to think about the 4P. But for infrastructure design, think about the people. What impact will it have, both on the people that will utilize the product, such as HS2, but also the people that are being impacted by the product, such as the farmers and the householders that are having to sell their homes because HS2 is basically knocking them down. When you're delivering essential services, life, water, energy, healthcare, think about responsible innovation and think about the public engagement. I said at the start that marketing is built in, not bolted on. If you try to take technical solution and try to bolt on marketing, you will fail. The people will see through it and they will see that you are not being genuine. Whereas if you engage with them at the very start of your project, they will understand that you have a task to do and you are genuinely seeking their opinion. And that's when you can get buy-in, and they may well come up with ideas that you hadn't thought of that makes your job as an engineer more effective and more productive. Thank you very much. And I hope you now understand that this woolly namby-pamby thing called marketing is actually a lot closer to engineering than any of you ever thought. Look at me. I've got a foot in both camps. I can do the Ohm's law. I can also do the marketing pitch. Thank you very much.